All right, new entrepreneur, get ready because today we're diving deep into Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman.
It's not your typical business book. It's really more about how our minds work, when we're making decisions as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, and as a new entrepreneur, you're making so many of them, like
Oh,
constantly.
exactly. And this book, it's like it gives you a peek behind the curtain, like right into your own brain and those quirks of thinking.
And those things that like trip us up, but also those cool shortcuts that can help us make smarter choices, right?
Exactly. And Kahneman, he talks about these two systems of
As two
thinking.
systems. Okay, tell me more about this. Two systems of thinking.
So think of system one as that quick, intuitive thinking, like when you're driving or catching a ball. It's fast, automatic, it's gut feeling.
Got it.
System two, that's the slower one, more deliberate, like solving a math problem or, when you're really planning your business strategy, more analytical.
Okay, so like when I'm brainstorming new product ideas, that's system one. But when I'm crunching numbers, like forecasting sales, that's when I need to switch to system two.
Exactly. And the key here is that both are super important. But knowing when to use which and how they can, sometimes lead you astray, that's the magic.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Way more interesting than I thought a book about thinking could be.
Mm.
So for a new entrepreneur like myself, what are some of the big takeaways? Like, what do I need to know to avoid making those rookie mistakes?
Well, one of the most important things is to be aware of these things called cognitive biases. They're like mental shortcuts our brain uses to make quick judgments, but they can lead us down the wrong path sometimes, make some irrational decisions.
Cognitive biases, got it. So are these biases like those times when I order takeout, even though I know I have food in the fridge?
Well, that might just be a craving. But yes, biases, they can work in a similar way. They often operate on a subconscious level, so you don't even realize it. Like, imagine you're interviewing for your first employee, and you meet someone charming, confident, great resume. You're instantly sold.
Oh, yeah, I can see where this is going. I get swept up in that charisma, and I make a hasty decision.
Exactly, that could be the halo effect. You overestimate their competence based on a single trait, right? Like charisma. Or let's say you're at a conference and everyone's raving about this marketing strategy. You start thinking, this is it. The secret to success, I need this right now.
And that's where I max out my credit card buying a course I don't need.
Yeah, so that could be the availability bias. We tend to, overestimate the likelihood of something happening just because we can easily remember these vivid examples.
Okay, so these biases, they can be dangerous, especially for someone like me starting out, making big decisions. I
Right.
could easily fall into those traps.
Exactly. And that's why being aware is so important. Just knowing that these biases exist, that's a huge step. So how do I avoid falling into those mental traps?
One strategy is to slow down that decision-making process. So when you feel that intuitive pull, that urge to jump to conclusions, that's your cue to engage system two. Like ask yourself, am I being influenced by a bias? What information am I missing? Is there a different way to look at this?
Okay, slow down. Engage system two. It's like hitting the pause button before I impulse buy that shiny new software.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to get outside perspectives. Find someone you trust, who's less emotionally invested, and ask them to, like, poke holes in your logic.
Oh, like a trusted mentor. Someone to give me a reality check when I'm getting a little carried away.
Exactly. And remember, you're not alone in this. Everyone falls prey to these cognitive biases. The key is to be aware and develop strategies for making more informed decisions. Now, speaking of informed decisions, let's talk about the planning fallacy.
Planning fallacy. Does that mean I'm gonna underestimate how much time it'll take to launch my website, end up pulling all-nighters for weeks? Well, it's definitely a possibility. The planning fallacy, it basically describes this tendency we have to underestimate the time, the resources, the costs, for a project. We tend to focus on the best case, everything going smoothly, and we often kind of overlook those potential problems.
Ouch. Yeah, I can totally see myself falling into that trap, especially when I'm excited to get my business off the ground. I might be wearing those rose-colored glasses when it comes to deadlines.
It's a very common pitfall, and it's often driven by our desire to believe in our own abilities and, the success of our ventures. But to combat this, Kahneman suggests something called reference class forecasting.
Reference class forecasting. That sounds kind of intimidating, but I'm listening.
No, it's actually quite simple. So
Mhm.
instead of just relying on your own optimistic projections, look at similar projects, in your industry or even your own past and see how long things actually took.
So instead of guessing how long it'll take to develop my new product, I should look at how long it took other companies to launch similar products.
Exactly. And pay attention to those like outliers, those projects that went way over budget, took much longer than expected. What were the factors that caused those delays? Are any of those present in your project now?
Okay, this could be really helpful. Learning from the mistakes, or at least the timelines of others. Instead of assuming everything's going to be perfect, I need to look at real-world data, and factor in those potential challenges.
Precisely. And speaking of potential challenges, one thing that can really trip up new entrepreneurs is overconfidence.
Overconfidence.
Yeah.
But isn't confidence a good thing? Like, don't I need to believe in myself and my ideas to succeed?
Of course, self-belief is crucial, but there's a fine line between confidence and overconfidence. And overconfidence is when we overestimate our abilities, our knowledge, or our control over events.
I see how that could be a problem. Like, I might think I can handle everything myself and not delegate, and then I'm burned out and overwhelmed.
Exactly. And it can lead to, like, poor risk assessment. You might underestimate the challenges or overestimate your likelihood of success. And here's the surprising thing. Research shows that even experts, people with years of experience, can be wildly overconfident.
Wait, seriously? So you're telling me that seasoned professionals can be just as bad as me at predicting the future?
It's humbling, isn't it? But it really highlights the limitations of intuition and the importance of data-driven decision-making.
Okay, so if experts can be so wrong, what's the alternative? How can I make better predictions and avoid, those overconfident blunders?
One surprising finding is that simple algorithms, they often outperform even, like, the most seasoned experts. We're talking basic formulas based on data, historical trends. They kind of cut through all the noise and give you a more objective view.
Whoa, hold on. So you're saying a basic formula can be more accurate than an expert's intuition? That just seems, I don't know, counterintuitive.
It is, but it's backed by a lot of research. And, think about it. Experts are human, right? They have those biases, those emotions. Algorithms, though, they're purely objective, just crunching the numbers.
Okay, so as a new entrepreneur, how do I actually use these algorithms? Should I just ditch all expert advice and just rely on formulas?
Not necessarily ditching it entirely, but definitely take it with a grain of salt. And whenever possible, look for ways to incorporate those data-driven formulas into your decision making.
Okay, can you give me a concrete example
Yeah,
how this might work in my business?
sure. Let's say you're trying to decide, okay, which marketing campaign to run. You could go with your gut or ask a, marketing guru, but you could also create a simple algorithm based on past campaign performance.
Oh, so looking at which strategies brought in the most customers.
Exactly. Which channels gave you the best return on investment? What kind of messaging worked best? The algorithm analyzes that data and helps you make a better choice.
Wow, that's pretty cool. It's like data illuminating the path
Mhm.
instead of stumbling around in the dark.
That's a great way to put it. And remember, you don't have to become a data scientist, right? Start by figuring out what are the key metrics, those drivers of your business, sales, conversion rates, things like that, and track them religiously.
Okay, so step one, figure out what to measure, then track it obsessively. Got it. What's next?
So once you have that data, look for the patterns. What are the common factors that contribute to success? What are the red flags, signaling those potential problems? Then use those insights to create simple rules of thumb to help guide your decisions.
So data leads to insights, which leads to better decisions. Starting to feel like a data detective here.
Exactly. And the more data you gather, the better those insights get and the more confident you can be.
Okay, sold on the power of data. But before we get too carried away with the data, can we go back to framing?
Yeah.
You mentioned it can really sway our choices.
Absolutely. Framing is all about how information is presented, It can really change how we react. Remember that example of the medical treatments? One framed as survival rates, the other mortality.
Yeah, the same risk, but totally different reactions.
Yeah.
One sounded way scarier, even though it was the same thing.
Exactly. And for us entrepreneurs, we need to be aware of framing, both in our own decision making and when we're communicating with others.
So when I'm pitching my business to investors, I need to think about how I frame the potential risks and rewards.
Exactly. Are you emphasizing those potential gains, the upside, or highlighting the risks?
Well, as an entrepreneur, I'm naturally optimistic. I want to get them excited, but I also need to be realistic about the challenges.
It's all about balance. Investors appreciate honesty and they want to see that you've considered the downsides as well as the upsides.
It's not about being deceptive, but choosing the right way to frame it so it resonates with the audience.
Exactly. Think about what they're looking for, what their concerns might be, and how you can address those while, still painting that compelling picture.
Okay, I'm starting to see how powerful this can be. It's like persuasive storytelling with data.
Yeah, that's a great way to think about it. And speaking of storytelling, remember that loss aversion concept?
Oh yeah, loss aversion. That's where we feel the pain of a loss way stronger than the pleasure of an equal gain.
Yeah, and it can really trip us up.
You mean like holding on to that failing product way too long when I should just cut my losses?
Exactly. We're so afraid of admitting defeat that we keep pouring resources into a sinking ship instead of moving on.
Ugh, I can see that happening. I can already imagine getting like emotionally attached to my first product, even if it's not doing well. How do I get over that?
One way is to reframe it. Instead of focusing on what you're giving up, what you might lose, shift to what you could gain by changing.
So, if I'm clinging to that failing product, I should focus on what I could gain by cutting it loose, like having the time to develop a new, better product.
Exactly. Imagine new customers, new markets you could reach. That shift, it can really make you more willing to change, take risks.
This is making me rethink all those times I've held on to things just, out of fear. It's like my emotions were clouding my judgment.
Very common. But once you're aware of it, you can make more rational choices. Speaking of rational choices, let's talk about another big one, managing risk.
Oh yeah, risk. Feels like every decision I make has some level of risk. How do I get better at dealing with that?
Well, Kahneman and his colleague, Amos Tversky, they developed something called prospect theory. Helps us understand how people make decisions under, uncertainty.
Okay, prospect theory. Tell me more. How does it work?
So basically, we evaluate potential outcomes, those gains and losses, relative to a reference point. And that's usually our current situation. And because losses, they loom larger than gains, it shows how sensitive we are to those potential losses, even if the potential gains are the same size.
So like that feeling of dread when I think about losing $100 is way stronger than that feeling of joy when I win $100. It just feels riskier to lose.
Exactly. And prospect theory also says we tend to overweight those small probabilities.
Like buying a lottery ticket, even though, the odds of winning are tiny.
Exactly. We overestimate the impact of that unlikely but amazing outcome. So, how do we use prospect theory to make better decisions about risk?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question.
One key is to be aware of that reference point. What are you comparing those potential gains and losses to? Is it just where you are right now, or is there some other benchmark?
I think I often get stuck comparing things to like where I am right now instead of the bigger picture.
Right. And that can make you too conservative, too focused on just avoiding losses. You might miss opportunities with some risk, but big potential.
So it's about broadening my perspective, thinking long-term, not just short-term wins or losses.
Exactly. And be mindful of how you're framing those risks and rewards. Are you emphasizing the potential losses, triggering that loss aversion, or the gains, making you more willing to take a chance?
This all ties back into framing, right?
Yeah.
The same risk, totally different depending on how you present it.
Absolutely. We need to be skilled at framing, both for our own decisions, to take those calculated risks, and when we talk to customers and investors, framing it so it resonates with them.
This is mind-blowing. It's like I'm finally understanding the psychology behind all of this.
That's the power of this stuff. It gives you a framework to understand not just yourself, but how others decide, and that can be super valuable.
This has been an amazing deep dive. I'm feeling much more equipped to handle the challenges of being an entrepreneur.
And we're not done yet. We have a lot more to explore. We'll be back after a short break to dig even deeper into thinking fast and slow.
All right, we're back. Ready to wrap up this deep dive into thinking fast and slow. My brain feels like it's been doing like bicep curls with all these new concepts.
Yeah, it's definitely a workout for the mind, but the more you use those mental muscles, the stronger your decisions get.
That's good to hear because I'm realizing a lot of my decisions have just been like gut feelings.
Yeah.
I was flying blind.
We've all been there. But now you've got this new lens, thinking about human behavior, the power of data.
It's like I've traded in those blurry intuition glasses for like high-definition data-driven ones.
I like that analogy. And speaking of data, there's one more thing from the book. Testing your assumptions.
Testing my assumptions. Isn't that what I'm doing every time I launch a product or try a new, marketing thing?
It is part of it, but we often make assumptions without even realizing it. Like we assume our audience wants this feature or that this marketing channel is going to work. But unless we test it, it's just a guess.
Okay, so how do I test these assumptions?
Run experiments. Start with a hypothesis, right? Like, if I offer a free trial, I'll get way more paid subscriptions. Then you design a test.
So like, split my website traffic, offer the trial to one group, not the other, see if there's a difference.
Exactly. A/B testing. Super powerful for entrepreneurs. Data-driven decisions. No more hunches.
All coming together. Biases, data, testing, framing, a whole new playbook.
Exactly. And it's ongoing. More experiments, more learning, better strategies.
I'm feeling so much more equipped to handle all this. Like I've got a secret weapon now.
That's exactly what we were going for.
Yeah.
You can steer the roller coaster now, not just react to it.
I can't wait to put this into action, and I know our listeners are too. Any last bits of wisdom before we wrap up?
Keep learning, keep questioning, keep experimenting. The world of business, of human behavior, it's always changing. Stay curious, stay adaptable.
Love it. And to our listener, congrats on taking this deep dive. We're so excited to see what you achieve with these new insights. Go make those dreams happen.